The Adventures of Ulysses by Charles Lamb. Open book prologue. The Trojan War being ended, the princes who had engaged in it returned to their own countries, but not all of them reached their homes so soon as they expected. Of these, none were so long delayed as Ulysses, king of Ithaca, a small island in the Ionian Sea. This prince had offended Neptune, the god of the sea, who took every occasion to persecute him, and would not suffer him to land in his own country till many years had elapsed. In the meantime, his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus remained in Ithaca, waiting with great sorrow for his return. Many noble suitors, believing Ulysses to be dead, resorted to his palace and wasted his substance, and urged Penelope to accept one of them for her husband. But she, still hoping that Ulysses would return, put them off from time to time with various excuses. The adventures which befell Ulysses in his wanderings, and the manner of his return to his own country, are the subject of the following history. Open book. Chapter I. The Ciconians, the Lotus Eaters, the Cyclops. Ulysses, with a fleet of 12 ships, set sail from Troy, and touched at the land of the Ciconians, where he took the city and killed the inhabitants, and might have returned home in safety if his companions had been content. But they stayed to plunder, and the Ciconians, calling in their neighbours, made a fresh attack upon them, and obliged them to retreat with loss. From thence they sailed, but were overtaken by a storm, which drove them for 9 days over the sea, and on the 10th day they reached the land of the Lotus Eaters. Here they sent some men to discover what sort of people inhabited the country. These men, on tasting the lotus which the inhabitants gave them to eat, forgot their country and all desire of returning, and wished only to remain there and feed upon lotus. But Ulysses brought them back by force, and, binding them under the benches of the ships, compelled them to depart. They next came to the land of the Cyclops, a lawless race who neither planted nor sowed, but trusted for food to what the earth produced of itself. Here Ulysses, with 12 of his companions, entered the cave of a Cyclops named Polyphemus, a giant of enormous size, who had but one eye in the middle of his forehead. They found in the cave great store of cheese and milk, and might have taken what they wanted and gone away, but Ulysses, wishing to see the inhabitant, stayed till he returned. Polyphemus came home at evening, driving his flocks before him, and entering the cave shut the door with a great stone. Seeing the strangers, he seized 2 of Ulysses's companions, dashed them against the ground and devoured them. The next morning he went out with his flocks, but first he rolled the stone to the mouth of the cave, and shut Ulysses and his companions in. In the evening he returned, and again seized 2 of them and made his supper of them. Then Ulysses, forming a plan for their escape, gave the Cyclops wine, which so delighted him that he asked Ulysses his name. Ulysses answered that his name was No Man. When the Cyclops had drunk too much, he fell asleep, and Ulysses with his companions heated in the fire a stake of olive wood and thrust it into his eye, putting it out. The Cyclops, roaring with pain, called to his brethren for help, but when they asked who had hurt him, he answered No Man, and they, thinking that no one had injured him, went away. In the morning, Polyphemus rolled away the stone to let out his sheep, feeling their backs as they passed, to prevent the Greeks from escaping. But Ulysses fastened his companions under the bellies of the sheep, and himself clung to one of the largest. Thus they escaped, and when they had reached their ships, Ulysses called out his real name to the Cyclops, who in his rage prayed to Neptune that Ulysses might never reach his home, or that, if he did, he might return late and in sorrow after losing all his companions. Open book. Chapter II. The Enchantress Circe, the Visit to the Shades. After leaving the country of the Cyclops, Ulysses and his companions came to the island of Aeolus, the god of the winds, who entertained them kindly, and at their departure gave Ulysses a bag, in which all the winds were confined, except the west wind, which was to waft them gently home. For 9 days they sailed prosperously, and on the 10th they came in sight of Ithaca, but the companions of Ulysses, thinking that the bag contained treasure, opened it while he slept. Immediately the winds rushed out, and raised a violent storm, which drove them back again to the island of Aeolus, who, perceiving that they were under the displeasure of the gods, refused to assist them any further. They next came to the land of the Laestrygonians, a race of giants who destroyed all the ships but that in which Ulysses sailed. From thence they arrived at the island of Circe, a powerful enchantress. Here Ulysses sent some of his companions to explore the country, but Circe, by her enchantments, turned them into swine. Ulysses, going to seek them, was met by the god Mercury, who gave him a plant called moly, which preserved him from the spells of Circe. When Circe attempted to enchant him, her charms had no power, and being struck with wonder, she restored his companions to their human form and treated them kindly. They remained with her a whole year, living in ease and pleasure, at the end of which time Ulysses, desirous of returning home, prevailed on her to let him depart. But she told him that before he could reach Ithaca, he must descend into the regions of the dead and consult the spirit of Tiresias, a famous prophet. Accordingly, Ulysses sailed to the utmost bounds of the ocean, and there performed the rites which Circe had directed to call up the shades of the departed. Among the spirits which appeared to him were those of many illustrious persons, and at last came Tiresias, who instructed him how to proceed on his voyage, and warned him of the dangers he would have to encounter. He also saw the shade of his mother, who informed him of what had passed in Ithaca during his absence. Having obtained this knowledge, Ulysses returned to the island of Circe, who now gave him further directions for his voyage, and told him of the perils he must avoid before he could reach his native land. Open Book Chapter III. The Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, the oxen of the sun. When Ulysses left the island of Circe, he followed the course which she had directed, and soon came near the island of the Sirens. These were sea nymphs, who by the sweetness of their singing enticed mariners to approach their shores, and then destroyed them. But Ulysses, remembering the advice of Circe, stopped the ears of his companions with wax, and caused himself to be bound to the mast of the ship, so that though he heard their enchanting song, he could not yield to it nor approach the shore. Having safely passed the Sirens, they next came to a narrow strait, where on one side was a dreadful rock, on which dwelt Scylla, a monster with 6 heads, each furnished with 3 rows of teeth, and on the other side was a dangerous whirlpool called Charybdis, which swallowed up the sea 3 times a day, and as often cast it up again. To avoid the whirlpool, Ulysses kept as near as he could to the rock, but Scylla, darting out her heads, seized 6 of his companions and devoured them. From thence they came to the island of the sun, where the god had sacred flocks and herds, which they were strictly forbidden to touch. Here they were detained by contrary winds for a long time, and their provisions failing, the companions of Ulysses in his absence killed some of the cattle and feasted upon them. When Ulysses returned and saw what they had done, he reproved them, but it was too late to repair the fault. As soon as they set sail again, Jupiter raised a terrible storm, and a thunderbolt struck the ship, which was shattered to pieces. All the companions of Ulysses perished, and he himself, clinging to a fragment of the wreck, was driven back to the strait of Scylla and Charybdis. He escaped the whirlpool with difficulty, and after many days of wandering arrived at the island of Ogygia, where dwelt the nymph Calypso, who received him kindly and detained him there for several years.